just kind of talk a little bit about what we're going to do now. We're just going to sort of just open the floor really to see if there are any questions for our panel. We'll try and keep it a little bit shorter than what's in your kind of pack, so that we can still try and run to time. So joining us on the panel, we also have Dr. Seamus is still there. Dr. Izzat Roche, who's also the lead counsellor for public health at Guildford Borough Council, and a big supporter of what we're doing at Guildford First as well. So I'll kind of open the floor. If anyone's got any kind of questions, please fire away.
Come on, we're at a mental health seminar, you can do it.
I
work in the construction industry.
Can you just wait till a microphone gets to you?
Coming.
Yeah. Sorry, sorry.
Okay, wait.
So
Helen, he's there. You do the other route, Helen.
There you go.
We've got two beautiful assistants with microphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I work in the construction industry and I'm anxious about just highlighting that actually. It's, talking about it is
Says we're live.
it's me.
Okay.
I think it's the you don't talk about
The gentleman said he works in the construction industry and people generally don't talk about mental health problems.
I mean, that microphone incident wasn't ideal for your level of anxiety during the course of that interaction. So I can respect. Really? Okay. We'll leave it as that then. I think generally, I work a lot in the rugby field, right? So which is another male-dominated kind of arena. And generally, people just, when you're a bloke's bloke, you don't want to talk about it, right? And a lot of my friends now in the rugby field, a lot of ex-international players who now don't have the pressure of whether they're going to get picked for the team because they're a bit mad or not, they can now start to talk about those issues. And it's becoming more acceptable for guys to talk about it. But you're generally, in previous years, 10, 12 years ago, you were emasculated for having cried at the Lion King, right? We've all done that, okay? So I think that there is a change, but I think this is a massive issue. And that's why, certainly from my perspective, when I got involved with Jeff initially, that was what I wanted to change in terms of going to a company that might have 300 or 400 staff, that might hear something in there, regardless of whether it was a swearing or whatever, and really pick out what their issue was, And actually, I've got men now responding to my blogs, because I'm doing a blog and it's like an anonymous environment. I've now got men coming back to me and saying, I'm 46, I'm 50, etc., etc. I finally realise what's wrong with me. And the question is now to the pub or to the doctor, So I think you're right in picking out on that.
But as I say, I think it's wrong that we think that men can't talk about it.
Definitely.
I think that is actually not the case. And actually, we've seen it in sports teams. We see it in the military where they really depend on each other as teams and as people. That they do share these things and talk about them more. And I think men can, but you just got to give them an opportunity. I was lucky enough to go and spend some time at Crossrail that do take 100 of mostly men, it's not all men, for mornings, and they do mental health sessions, and they can't stop talking about it if you give them the space to do it.
it's the right space.
Yeah.
I think it's evenings like this. It's evenings like this where we were trying to get some ladies, and yes, I'm pleased we got Mandy. Because I can tell you in some ways in business.
And later.
Yes. But in business, for a woman to be vulnerable about mental health, they've got enough barriers to try and overcome, to climb up the corporate ladder. So imagine trying to get them to talk about this issue. I think it's even more difficult for women. So I think evenings like this, and having more women talking about this sort of stuff, having more men, Pete, talking about this. And then my other point around how do we start shifting the narrative? When I use the word mental health, people immediately go to depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. When I use the word physical health, people don't immediately go to cancer, diabetes, glandular fever. So how do we start shifting the narrative so that it's okay to talk about? How do we make it aspirational and it's okay to talk about our mental health? So, it's going to take time. Your industry's got some great stuff on the go right now called Mates in Mind. So I think there's progress being made.
But I also think that every conversation about mental health opens up other conversations. That's what I talk about on Twitter all the time. You know, so a conversation here might mean that somebody from here will be at work tomorrow and say to somebody, oh, I saw this thing last night. Oh, depression. Oh, yeah, I've suffered from depression. And then it ripples out from there. So every conversation enables people to talk about it. I was doing some speed mentoring for International Day of the Girl today, and we did this amazing event on the London Eye where they got some schoolgirls from London, and the other mentors were saying, oh, I work in business, I'm an entrepreneur, I work in, you know, whatever it was. And I said, I'm a nurse and I love my job and I love talking about mental health. And I had the girls queuing up to come and see me, and you know, one of them was saying about her own issues, one was saying she wants to get a career in mental health, and somebody else was talking about other issues. But it's because I'm proud to talk about it and I'm okay to talk about it, and those girls will then go and then have conversations with their school friends. So every conversation that we have about mental health in the workplace, at home, with families, on social media, anywhere, enables other people to have that conversation.
If I can just go back though to the point that you made in relation to sort of almost a set image, you know, the construction industry being macho or the rugby environment being macho. We're almost looking at it from the outside in, because it isn't just the stigma that we think we're going to receive from others, it's actually the innate intrinsic stigma that we fear, actually breaking down those barriers and admitting that we're vulnerable, that we're imperfect, and that we need help. Nobody is, but nobody wants to actually be perceived as not the hard man or not the rock that everybody else thinks they are because they're there for other people. And I think you're absolutely right, certain industries do still have, you know, certain perceived images, whether it's because of the lifestyle that goes with those industries or the gender invariably, and often the age range. I think if you look at, I often have patients who are slightly older, and for a man in his 50s or 60s, to contemplate talking about 50. Depression. Yeah. I did not.
Yeah, but they don't look
that.
as good as you, Jeff. Come
I
on.
did not say that. I'm talking about men at work and older men. The concept of talking about having poor mental health or depression, they view very differently. They feel makes them look weak, whereas patients who are studying, you know, at the ACM, who are 18 and 19. Will come and actually say, I think I'm depressed, I want to talk it through. So it's a cultural change, it's an age change, and I think as everybody has said, the more you talk about it, the less perceived stigma and the less intrinsic stigma there will be.
I think as well, one of the things that I've noticed I run a private counselling practice as well, and I know certainly when I started out training and you have to go into therapy yourself, I thought, well, I want to see a female counsellor, I want to see somebody this age, and this will fit the ideal of what I perceive a therapist should be like. And that was fine, and then eventually I sort of need to challenge myself and actually see a male therapist as well, which seemed slightly odd given that I'm a male. But what I've noticed over the years is that over two-thirds of my clients are men. And, you know, so I've never sort of really worked out exactly why that is, but I've got lots of perceptions of why I believe that is. So men are quite capable of going to talking about their issues, exposing themselves emotionally, but it's just finding the right environment. That might be me, it could be a woman, it doesn't really matter, but I think it's just finding that link, and for me I've just seen that, you know, more of my clients are men.
Question here. Hello, my name is Sonia Hutton-Taylor. I'm an ex-member of the medical profession. I'd like to ask Mandy, where do you think the difficulty in saying no comes from with people or with yourself, and what do you think it has done for you in terms of liberating you to be able to say no more?
I think, can you hear me? I think that, I know nurses will say this, but it is part of the nursing profession. You do take a lot on, and it's very difficult to kind of say no at work. What I've learned for myself is that if I keep saying yes to everything, I'm not looking after myself, I'm not showing myself self-compassion, and I'm going to run out of time, and I'm not going to be able to do it, which will then end up in stress. So rather than say yes, which I did before, and then work long hours, and then I run my own business, and then do this, and then do that, and then social events, and then not have time. Now I just say, oh, I'm not coming, or I'm not doing that, or I'll come, but I'll just come briefly. So, and the other thing which I use to my advantage is I got out of a family event by just saying I wasn't going to come, and then they went, oh, I don't think you should come. I said, I'm doing it for my mental health, and they went, oh, it's fine, carry on, because they didn't want me to get ill again. So I was a little bit manipulative, but actually it's true. I'm being self-compassionate. So learning to say no was really, really powerful. I was talking to this isn't a particular name drop. We were doing some work for aspiring nurse directors. And I was with the deputy chief nurse, and she was talking about, she was what's it called, director of nursing in a large mental health trust in a county, and the chief operating officer left. So the chief exec said, oh, do you mind doing that job as well? And she went, yes, and she took it on. So she doubled her workload without adding another 37 or 40 or 50 hours to her week, and just did it.
Do you think it's not just about self-care, it's about setting boundaries and having reasonable boundaries?
Setting boundaries, having reasonable boundaries is really important. And saying no without giving an excuse. I'm not going to come, or I'm not going to do that, or I can't do that, or I will do it, or I can do it, but it will be in a couple of weeks. And negotiating, definitely.
Got a question here.
So coincidentally, I also work in construction, so I fully appreciate where you're coming from with that. And I think in construction, there is 4 times the national average or something along those lines. So it's a horrendous situation. Where I want to ask the question though is, within my own business, I work in construction at a European level, and so I've been instigating a change on mental health throughout the organisation. And that isn't me going, oh, look at what I've done, but like in some of the countries, so in Italy, which is quite backward on mental health, I can tell the management team are really, really engaged on it. And some of the other countries, they're doing everything, they're ticking the boxes, but part of me just has that feeling of, is it really genuine, what they're doing? And so the question really here is there anything you can do which makes sure that it is a little bit more ingrained in their minds, so it is a very real change, and not just something which they feel they should be doing to tick a box or look good to employees?
I think you have to take it out of context. So the thing is, I present in a very different way. Most people don't condone swearing. We're not very PC in that aspect. You know, I'm not going to get all the TV channels like lining up to book me to swear at children, right? But at the same time, what I do is I decontextualise how you see a mental health evening. Okay, so you're coming in here tonight and you're expecting us all to get morose and talk about stories, and then there's a positive light at the end of the tunnel, but fundamentally we take you on that journey and we speak really calmly and we're all together. And it's that kind of mentality, right? And so we assume that when we go out to these types of events, we're going to want to see that. Now, I think that if you take it out of the box and if you create this kind of montage of different elements of what we've done this evening, I think you will sort of disjunctify how people see these types of things. You know, so I've been to construction companies and I've been to rugby-related environments and these kind of things and done that type of thing. And people have related more because they felt that I wasn't trying to fit within the confines of what is okay to explain to you, or the way in which I should explain it to you clinically or in a certain, you know. I was put off by the NHS, and I'm not slagging off the NHS. My sister is a nurse and she runs a massive team in the NHS, and I think the fact that we have that is the most amazing thing on the planet. Other countries don't have the same level of care that we do. But I was let down by my police force in Guildford initially, and by what was available in my area at that time. And I think that that's probably why I want to champion that dynamic in a way. Because it's not okay to swear at people, it's not okay to talk about what I'm talking about, it's not okay to talk about these kind of messed up situations we've been in. But fundamentally, what you went through as you were growing up, and those dark things that you won't tell anybody else, if I put my neck on the line and I tell you about mine, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go and talk to someone about yours. But what it might do is it might make you feel a little bit more okay about moving past them.
Can I give a view on that? The reason why I would say in the 90% of the organizations that I go into, well-being is a tick box exercise. It's run twice a year. We have a lovely well-being week. we have 400 people in the office and maybe 20 come to the different talks. The reason why I don't think it is being done like it should be done is because we haven't institutionalized it into organizations. So, and let me tell you what I mean by that. If we think about performance or a development conversation, I spent 25 years developing performance management systems. Performance equaled knowledge, skill, behavior, and experience. Why didn't I include energy in that performance equation? Because energy is the most important driver of performance. You can have the knowledge, you can have the skills, you can have the behaviors, but if you've got no energy. Now, the reason we didn't put it into our performance management and development conversations is I didn't know what drove energy. Now I know what drives energy. It's my well-being. It's my physical, my emotional, my mental, and whether I've got purpose and meaning. Guess what? I can now measure that. So just like I can do a skills assessment of you, we do a skills assessment, you need to go on a training course. We do a 360-degree feedback, you need to go and get a coach to improve your behaviors. Now, what I think we start doing is we start measuring people's energy. What we then start doing is we then force and we drive individual accountability for energy. Because if you didn't go on the training course for a skill and your performance dropped off, I'd fire you. The same with your behavior. I think in time we want to get to a point where we're holding people accountable for their energy. But we can't just hold people accountable, individuals, we must also hold the organizational accountable. And so what that starts to drive is if you start putting it into the development conversations and the performance management system, every single line manager has to now start having a development conversation with their people about their energy and helping them to think about what is it that they've got to do. And that company needs to then be more responsible for making sure they have got in place resources to enhance the physical, the emotional, the mental, and have about a sense of purpose in an organization. And so we drive accountability at two levels, at an organizational level and an individual level. And without that level of accountability, people are just not going to do it. So that's the way I think we should be, yes, you get some parts of the organization that are doing it well and others that aren't. I think we've got to build it into our development and performance management systems in companies.
Thank you. Kristen Rivers, Surrey Business School, so I'm used to saying that. It was really nice actually when you talked about performance. So I'm running the Centre for Management Learning here, and one of our big questions is about how should we educate those leaders of the future? And I think, we talk about responsibility, ethics, mental health issues, and how we run performance and lead businesses. What do you think we can do as a business school to break the stigma and change the way how they think about it?
I think for me, that was the point in time where when I came here, that period of 18 to sort of 21, which I didn't quite make it through, let's say. But that period of my life, the 18 to 21 spectrum, the university years, let's say, was probably the most, sort of all over the place thing that I've been through. When I look at mental health now, Jeff's campaigning for these big businesses who can get some kind of organisational structure in place, but I run my own business day to day. I don't have loads of staff, and I still want to top myself every 5 minutes. So the problem is, how do you help those people as well? And I think you have to teach a sense of openness. You have to try and help them to be emotive, but you also have to transform how they perceive mental health as a brand, let's say. Keep doing this because it makes me seem pretentious. But it's really important for them to understand that it's not all about deep depressive. Jeff was talking earlier on about these images of black and white photos and burying our heads in our hands and these kind of things. And frankly, when I was at drama school, I didn't even see any of that. So I didn't even get the depressive imagery. There was just no imagery. There was no support mechanism in that sense. And I think that the beauty of PR and how you perceive things and how you portray things to people, and especially young, impressionable minds, is that you can start to work them in a direction that makes it okay and acceptable to cry at the Lion King, and makes it okay to talk about that situation and how that made you feel. And I think that's how you can make a change, certainly from a business school perspective. I've worked with a business school, my business partner came from there, and I think there's you've probably got more of an area where you can make a change than other people because of their drive to be an entrepreneur, right?
No, I think as well it's about creating that opportunity again. You know, I know I came along and talked to a group of yours a few years ago, and that was an opportunity for me and for them. But unless we can have that engagement, then you've got this battle all on your own, and you've got so many people around you, so many resources that you could use. I'm not just talking to you, the university as a whole, that why not engage with them? And more often than not, it's offered for free. So, you know, that could make a big shift.
Can I also add, though, I think we're going to see, you know, the generation now, even the generation at school that are going to university, I think it's happening in universities now. I spent a year in an American university. They're ahead of us in the language. They're ahead of us in the expectation of care, ahead of us in the expectation of what they want from their workplace. We've actually got to catch up with them. And you know, the real drive for change in mental health is going to be them, very talented young people, going to an employer saying, what have you got in place for me to look after my well-being and mental well-being? Because as someone in America said to me, those businesses didn't give gay people same-sex partner rights because they believed in it. They did it because they wanted those graduates who were really talented to join them. So the more that we empower those people that are coming through the system who use a language that we don't even use, and we're supposed to be experts at mental health, to go and ask bosses, do you know what have you got in place? I think that's the way it's going to change things. My God, that sounds really like Citizen Smith there. You know what I mean?
I'll stand up.
Showing my age.
I also think that I want to come back to this point around, you know, there's a bit of research done by a publishing company that was publishing a book. What are the 10 most enjoyable walks in the world? What do you think was one of the 10 most enjoyable walks in the world? Thinking about the work environment today.
Walk home from work.
On what day?
Friday.
On a Friday. Now this is not,
I don't get
this
that.
is dinkum truth.
Let me go straight over.
One of the 10 most enjoyable walks in the world is to walk home from work on a Friday afternoon. What have we done to work? And so, in my 3 years of going in and out of organizations, the most limiting resource that I see in companies today is the energy of people. They are frazzled. They are close to burnout. They are burnt out. They are suffering in silence. People are frazzled. So if you're going to lead in this environment that we are all under right now, and the pressures, I think we've got to teach all leaders the link between well-being, energy, and performance across the spectrum in business schools, and become overt about this link between energy and performance. Because you know what it's like to work for a leader who gives energy versus a leader who sucks every bit of energy out of you. And so, but we've never been taught, what is it that maintains my well-being? How do I keep my battery full? We've never been taught that, and that's what I think we should be teaching.
If I can come in on that actually, I was having talks with Alex Jabasi before she left to go to Exeter, and for people who don't know what she did, she was part of the business school, but in relation to behavioural psychology, and we were talking about how the business school is creating the leaders of tomorrow, and how the business world has to have different leaders in order to have the appropriate balance between work and life, how you can enjoy your work and your life can actually be, it can be part of your life rather than taking over your life or taking you away from your home life. And I think that as you are, hopefully teaching the leaders of tomorrow, that is something that you will be looking at. But I think that something that's quite interesting, I think before, Matthew, you were talking about employers or bosses, as I think someone wanted to call them earlier, actually giving their staff time to do things that they enjoyed, so perhaps volunteering, and all those aspects. When you're talking about a working environment, you're actually talking about a whole family unit in a way, away from your actual home life. And I think it is about giving everybody an opportunity to potentially take part in other schemes that aren't necessarily directly related to the success of that business, that is about giving the individual an opportunity to take part in acts that perhaps the business support, that is about the success of the individual, then the success of the team, and then the success of the organisation.
Yeah. But just coming to this, imagine if this energy pyramid, sorry, and then I'm going to let you, this energy pyramid, right at the top of this pyramid of well-being is purpose and meaning and giving, all right? Imagine having a development conversation with your people to say, you know what, I've noticed your energy is low because you're not recovering enough. This is now, every line manager's got to have this conversation. And guess what? I don't want to see you working after 5 o'clock. I don't want to see you at your desk over lunchtime. I mean, this creates a completely different conversation in the organization. By the way, I want you to go and do some stuff for that charity down at X, Y, and Z. So every line manager is thinking in this way, rather than the emotionally intelligent or the caring line manager, and they're few and far between, who's going to point out doing that sort of thing. We've got to institutionalize this. We've got to hardwire it into the organization so that everybody does it.
Some of the organisations, Jeff and I have been into many organisations before, and some of these organisations, they don't have necessarily the budget and the funding to be able to do something on a level that will affect 700, 1,000 people necessarily. And I think that you can make simple steps, like some of the companies I've been working with have just employed a psychologist to come in for a day a week, and it's totally anonymous, and you can go and talk to them anytime, and they're there all day. And other companies have employed massage therapists and people like that, where again you can just go and relieve stress and that kind of thing. And it's paid for, and everyone may go or no one may go, but it's now an acceptable thing within those offices to just go off as you feel is comfortable. And I think that, Jesus, I might be working for someone else if they start bringing that sort of stuff about, especially the massage.
Can we just take one more question?
Yeah, this is the last question.
Is this on working? Yeah.
Hold it just slightly closer.
My name's Sarah Page, and thank you all very much for all the different things that you've said that have been so inspirational. There's tons I could talk to you about, but I want to pick up on the thing about line managers. My last job for the last pretty much 10 years has been working for a trade union that represents line managers in a lot of different sectors. Energy, construction, defence, heritage, all sorts. I think there's a lot more. I think that the conversation needs to be much bigger than energy, to be honest, even though I think what you're saying is fantastic. Because line managers these days are expected to take on so much. As organisations have got leaner, line managers now, they have to do things that used to be picked up by HR, welfare, finance, blah, blah, blah. There's absolutely loads of things. And one of the things that we observed was the whole line manager squeeze. Yeah. And how can line managers do this stuff when they themselves are so, I don't know if it's fragile, they feel so vulnerable and so pressurized. Yeah. So I think it's about looking at the world of work in a much more expansive way around good work. The lady there, sorry, is it Irene?
That's fine.
So you talked about the five, in essence, the 5 ways to well-being is what I'm hearing. Fantastic stuff that can be integrated within organisations. But
But my point is, you know what my point is? That's why line managers have got to start learning how to look after themselves.
Yes, I couldn't.
And the only way they can start learning how to look after themselves and maintain their energy is if I, as an organisation, hold them accountable for that. Because otherwise they won't do it. They won't. And they'll end up like I was.
But I think it's also, to take the question earlier, asking Mandy about how do you say no? And I think that's a lesson for all of us, because we all... Sorry?
But I'm an ex-HSE inspector, and a big flaw in all of this is that the Health and Safety Executive has not been regulating stress properly. Because actually, not only do they have a lot of practices that could be informing organisations that aren't persuaded, and actually, but also there's a whole piece there, a competency framework for line managers, and it encapsulates precisely the things that you're talking about.
I think actually what you've said in relation to the amount of almost burden that is put on the average line manager, that tends to then actually create the problem we're trying to solve. More mental health problems, more stress, more anxiety, and that, because they are in a managerial capacity, percolates out, and the staff tend to be equally stressed, more depressed. And I think sometimes line managers also feel they're being watched head down. They have to drive efficiency and improvements, and there's an awful lot of burden resting on their shoulders. I think you're absolutely correct in relation to how people have to learn to say no, as Mandy said, and as Jeff has said, and about line managers looking after themselves. But I think that also requires a broader change within many industries. Larger organisations have the luxury of having occupational health departments. So occupational health teams can actually pick up a lot of the day-to-day concerns and link up with GPs if people are having mental health problems or any physical health problem. But for smaller organisations or organisations where there isn't quite that stability, you've got line managers who are trying to be all things to all people. And in reality, that is not possible. But I think if in some cases, the average line manager, as I've worked in different size organisations, I think if the average line manager just knows where to go to get certain resources, whether they're online accredited and reliable resources, or even just the standard, why don't you go and see your GP? And then facilitating that person, do you want to come and tell me how it went with your GP? So you actually give them a set date and a target, so they intrinsically and very subtly start to bring in a team that isn't actually employed by their company to actually look after the health and well-being of that person who's struggling and that person they're having support. And intrinsically, it will be of benefit to them. And most importantly, it will send a message out to other staff and to other bosses to say this is something that we have to do together.
I think by the education, and Matthew asked earlier about the bosses, and I guess I would include myself in that, and my grand title CEO. The 32 staff, 60 volunteers, and about 300 odd clients. And for me to say to my board, actually, no, I can't do that because there is only me, was really difficult. And I don't think it's not just line managers, but the message that we can all take back, particularly those bosses who are out there, that we've got to set the culture as well. It needs everybody to be part of that, but we've got a major part to play in that, where we can say, actually, you know what, I can't do that. That's unrealistic. It's unreasonable and unrealistic because I've got to take care of my mental health, because if I don't, then I'm not going to be here.
The CEO effectively has the most important focus of all in reality, because the CEOs who aren't making the effort of fobbing it off onto a line manager, and I work with a line manager at Standard Life who can't talk about it with the guys at the big boys table. And he's getting insider information from me and using blog posts and things like that to feed out to his team, because he knows that that's going to make them more effective long term because they've got that outlet. But why the hell is the guy at the top of Standard Life food chain not stepping back and going, do you know what, guys, I had this time during college where I had an issue and actually it's okay to talk about it, so why don't we adapt that mentality? Why should we put the pressure on a line manager? Why should that be the person that is under pressure to make that change for the organisation because someone else has got too much money or is too lazy to do so, We can't all be a Jeff or a Clive.
Last comment, and you'll know this better than I do. We've got it right for safety. I made the point earlier, we've invested billions in health and safety. It's mainly been in safety. And I'll play a statistic out for this. How many people are off work? There are 34 million people who work in this country in some form of employment. How many are off work for more than 7 days in any given year as a result of an LTA, a lost time accident? How many out of 34 million are off work for more than 7 days? 20,000 out of 34 million. That's how well we've addressed safety and created safety cultures in organizations. Guess what the number is for disclosed cases of depression and anxiety?
It is the biggest. It's the biggest.
500,000 of disclosed cases, 500,000.
Yeah.
Yet we are not investing, educating, communicating differently, legislating and shifting the organisations in the area of health, in particular mental health. But we know how to do it because we've done it with safety.
I think there's one other point that I would just like you to take away with you, and that is that we talk about the bosses, we talk about the individuals and whose responsibility is it. But looking at some evidence from Mersey Care, NHS Trust, they said of the 70% of the suicides in the year that they were monitoring, 70% of those were unknown to services. They were not engaged with services.
Yeah.
So we cannot go away from here thinking this is somebody else's responsibility. The NHS will do this, somebody else will do this. It's up to all of us. And we can all do it. We've just got to step up to the plate. And we must stop.
I know you're about to finish. All I would say is I think it's approximately 50% of people who have significant periods of time off work. The underlying issue is thought to be due to depression and other mental health problems. However, as Jeff said, in relation to the number of disclosed cases, the number of times you see people who have chronic pain or chronic migraines, and I'm not suggesting that everybody who has chronic pain or chronic migraines necessarily has an underlying cause that is anything other than physical. However, you have to understand that the way less than perfect mental health, and none of us have perfect mental health, less than perfect mental health impacts on the physical as well as the emotional. So in reality, if you were looking at disclosed versus non-disclosed versus what you can anticipate as being the correct percentage, it's thought to be about 50% of all long-term sick leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm going to stop there, guys. Sorry.